Hello, everyone. Welcome to Arash's World. Today we have a special guest, Jill McAbe. Welcome here.
Thank you so much, Arash. It's great to be here.
Now, one of the toughest questions, let's just get that one out of the way, is how would you describe yourself briefly to our audience?
Well, hello, audience. I'm delighted to have a chance to speak to you today. I am an author, a business coach, and an educator, specifically for purpose-driven entrepreneurs. My main thing is helping you clarify a business vision and building it faster, taking it further with a big interest in neuroscience and behavioral science and how you can rearrange your world to make success much easier, more inevitable, and more fun.
Okay. Oh, I like the fun part, right? So it's not all just like work. It's also a bit of fun and games.
Oh no, a big thing about my community is that we've sort of been there, done that on the work too much for whether it's for ourselves or for someone else. And a big driver of everybody that I work with is about how to be so intentional with what you're doing that you can't imagine having more fun with your life. I have, yeah, like I've said, I've done the hard work thing. I've done the work too much thing. I've done the misaligned priorities thing. And that's why I like working with purpose-driven entrepreneurs, because even when you are working on what you're doing, it is fun because you see real usefulness for people or for society, for you or for your family. And it creates this incredible sense of being, and that's fun.
Yeah, but a lot of it also depends on like finding the right thing for you. And we're going to talk about that too. But your book is It's Go Time, your latest book. It's Go
Yeah.
Time, Build the Business and Life You Really Want. And I think that fits in perfectly here. So finding the business and the life you want, everything kind of a holistic view of it. And it starts with ourselves.
It does. And I'm gonna, I've had a chance to work with a lot of people since writing the book. So in the book, I take people through, first of all, why you are where you are now. Really, how did you get here? All of the things that are amazing about your life, how
Mhm.
did they happen? All of the things about your life that you're questioning, why did they happen? Because it's not until we understand how we got to where we are that we're going to be more empowered to make new choices about where we're going. So that's job number one, I think. But with the book, I'm also really intentional about building a business that fits your life. My first business was a multi-million dollar business that took a lot of hours, time, a big team. It was very exhausting to run. And that wasn't something that I wanted for my future. And most of my clients want to make a difference in the world, but not to the point, or our group members and things like that, but not to the point where they're exhausted or drained. And it's funny because a lot of people, that business in life you really want, I hear people sort of describing these $1 million businesses and getting interviewed on Oprah, and then contrasting that. And that's activities that people could do in chapter 5 of my book. But then when I ask them, well, what do you want your life to be like? It's like, well, I want to wake up and meditate. I want to eat something really clean for breakfast. I want to work for a little while. I want to have lunch with a friend. I want to, exercise and do yoga. And I contrast, I say, the business you're describing, this $1 million business, be careful because bigger isn't always better. And
Mhm.
what a lot of people don't understand is that you can actually have a very similar lifestyle if your business is doing between 250 and 400. In fact, you could have a much better lifestyle than if your business is 1, 2, 3 million. And so what will happen is, like, some people will put these like goal, and it doesn't matter if you're a listener, if you're thinking, oh, I want to do a business or another kind of goal, or be noticed for a certain kind of work. If you make the goal much bigger than it really needs to be for no good reason, your body, your brain won't let you work on that goal. So oftentimes, we'll create these really nice lifestyle businesses, and people are like, oh, just in a handful of hours a week, I can make a difference. I can make money. I can improve the quality of my life. I can bring money in, but it doesn't need to be this all-consuming thing. Now, it can be if someone wants to go and build a giant company, that's fine. But a lot of people who work with me really want a solid company, but not exhausting. And that's, I think, a big thing that I noticed. So it's just
Would
like,
you
I want
say,
to enjoy a thing, and then you don't really.
would you say that it's better to start small, maybe taking step by step? Is that what you're saying? Or should we already dream big and try to go for the big thing? What would you
I'm
say?
saying we should match it to the life we want to live. And that's
Okay.
why I really bring that in. In chapter 5, I describe an activity where you just, you create something called a pathfinder vision. A vision in a business is really important. But if someone was just starting out, a pathfinder vision is better, because until you've started a little bit, you don't really know how you're going to take your business.
Mhm.
You need to spend the first couple of years trialing things. And that's what I teach in my book. It's Go Time. There's an order of operations that make that go much more efficiently with less work. What I'm saying is to match, not necessarily have big goals, not necessarily have, I call it Goldilocksing. It's not
Goldilocks.
having giant goals. It's not having tiny goals. It's having goals. If you want to lie around on a beach all day long and you don't want to work, well, then don't create a business that's going to require 30, 40, 50 employees. Although you may get to that beach at some point, it's 1% of entrepreneurs who are going to get there. Instead, you might be amazed at what you can create. I asked a CEO of fairly large Fortune 500 companies, and we were chatting, we were having dinner, and they said, what do you think is the hardest amount of money for an entrepreneur? He's like, I pay the entrepreneurs between 1 and 10 million. Those are tough years. And it's funny because you might say to someone who's just a few hundred, you might say to someone who's like around 100 or a few 100,000, and they're so struggling for that, but they don't realize how much they're going to have to work to get beyond that. So I'm just saying match. And if you're just like, that's what I want to do and that's fun, then do that, but do it because it's fun.
Yes. Yes, that's hugely important. Should we have a feedback loop of seeing like, okay, like you try out something. And I think one of the things too, and you're talking about here, something that mistakes that you've made. And I think people are too afraid of making those mistakes. So they try to avoid it, but they don't see the potential that those mistakes could lead towards growth and towards really understanding what you really want. And so they don't jump in because they're afraid of make that it would be a mistake. So and the kind of question that I'm getting at is like, how do we really find out what we really want? Because often we think we want something, but that's not what we want.
Correct. Oh boy, that's a huge question. What a smart question. So much in what you just said. Let me capture this. So for me, my head's going in two directions, because that is the truth. I mean, I'm the expert on helping people find what they really want. And I've helped countless people do this, directly worked with dozens, if not hundreds of people on this. And, I've had over 20,000 students on this topic who have organically found me online. And I'd say not truly knowing what we want. Here's what I'd say. It's actually a process. I can almost guarantee that any goal, like not almost guarantee, no, I know science shows us that any goal that you haven't already achieved, that you've wanted for a while, that you believed you have wanted for a while, it's actually scientifically shown that you don't actually want that. So there's a difference between conscious and subconscious goals. And it's actually our subconscious goals that win. And by that, I mean, you do achieve all of the goals in your subconscious. You don't achieve all of the goals in your conscious mind, because your subconscious mind acts before your conscious mind. And so that's where you get these inconsistencies in your behavior, where you state one thing and do another, or where you desire one thing and you're like,
Or we
why?
self-sabotage. I mean, we do that too. And there's like a part of you says that you want to do it, but then the subconscious doesn't want to do it. And then it doesn't work out.
Absolutely. And that's a very innocent situation. So the self-sabotage sounds like, to some degree, perhaps we're hurting ourselves.
Mhm.
And I think it's important to understand that it's very innocent. It's an identification that there are competing goals in your mind,
Mhm.
and the one you consciously want is subservient to the one you don't even know you have. And
Yeah.
that is a big part of my book. It's Go Time is helping people to identify these things, and then of course understand that there are very straightforward and easy things that you can do to reprogram. They take your time, they take your attention, and anyone can do them. And so they're really worth it. So coming back to that, I don't know what my goals are. Like, how do I figure out what my goals are? For me, it's an unpacking process.
Mhm.
It's not something that happens instantly. You state a goal, you ask yourself, why do I want this goal? Why else do I want this goal? What do I believe will happen if I achieve this goal? And you can take a number of steps. And I do teach on goal setting with something I call the MOMA method, because typical goal setting methods do not reveal the underlying desire for the goal. And that puts your goal at risk of many problems. So that's the first step. But the second step that I think is really important is you do start working on that goal, because as you start working on that goal, especially bigger goals, you almost certainly will discover that that goal will shift and move.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people who work with me, growing their businesses, especially in the first few years, that's a lot of the support is just re-identifying that moving target. And it's not wrong to have a moving target in the beginning. It's one person described it to me as, imagine climbing a mountain. You see the peak of the mountain, you're like, I want to go there.
Mhm.
I want to get there. And you're like, yay. And off you go. And let's just pretend you're like, you're all in, you found your purpose and you're going, and you're like going towards that mountain top. Well, as you're climbing, all of a sudden you see another mountain range beyond the tip of the mountain you were going for. You're like, oh, I didn't even know that mountain range was that. What?
Mhm.
And so as we work towards our goals, more comes into view, more becomes possible. And you asked earlier in this conversation, should I have great big goals or small goals? Well, that actually depends on what motivates you. So it was hard to answer that directly, but I'll answer it now. You want to have goals just beyond what you think you can achieve.
Mhm.
So you want to so if people are like 10x your goal, that's not always the right thing to do, because it might seem impossible to you. And
Mhm.
if it seems impossible, you won't work on it because it's certain failure. And we don't work on things that feel like certain failure.
Mhm.
But it has been shown by science, if you take it and stretch it just a little beyond, and I always say, when you're at your right kind of amount of big on your goal, if one day you're like, I'm going to get there, and the next day you're like, I don't know if I'm going to get there. And then the day after that, you're like, I'm going to get there. And the next day you're like, I'm not sure if I'm going to get there. I love that. I think that's the perfect amount of, yes, no.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and it's a comfort zone that we get stuck in, and just like pushing like beyond that. So it feels slightly uncomfortable, I think, but not overwhelmingly so, because then we would give up, right? And it's also with like when you do dieting or you want to lose weight and doing exercise, it's that kind of like the push, but not overdrive, I think. And
Yes.
and just one of the things too, I know it's like when we look back as children, we pretty much know what we really want to do. I think we are more in line with the subconscious at that point. And then there's all these other voices that are telling you, no, this is not good. This won't make money, or this is not a good career choice. And as a writer, I mean, as a kid, I wanted to be a writer, but we didn't have podcasting. So then that's when you say, well, this is another mountain, and I like that what you're saying, and just adjusting to that. I can do the same amount of creativity, but in a different form. And that's where our intuition, I think, would really help us to guide us in that right direction.
It's critical. I
Mhm.
think nurturing your intuition. So my background, how did I, come to be a best-selling author, a business coach, an
Mhm.
educator? I've
Mhm.
spent decades in this field. I've been an entrepreneur, and I think we talk about that reflection is such an important thing. I remember going to do my master's in leadership. At the time, I most of my work was around training leaders within entrepreneurial organizations and the entrepreneurs at the top of those organizations. That's a big focus of the masterminds and memberships that I offer now, because I really believe that we need to teach entrepreneurs sort of how to fish. What are the true leadership skills? I was really surprised. And this was after being somebody who developed leaders for years. I was really surprised when I did my master's that probably the number one thing that made a difference to how much money you make as an entrepreneur was vision. That over a century of research has shown that you can increase the amount you make or how fast you go by 2 to 12 times, and most 10 to 12 times, simply by having a clearly articulated, meaningful goal for the future that's underscored by purpose. That is why such a big part of my work is helping people craft those visions. But the other thing is reflection. It's true knowledge of self. And this gets back to what you were saying, is that ability to have quiet time with yourself, that ability to look within, is where power comes from. Because in my opinion, your power is directly correlated to how true you're being to yourself. And what I was going to say this earlier when I said, oh, that's such a big question. I'm actually going to say entrepreneurship, especially purpose-driven entrepreneurship, which is, it's really a category within entrepreneurship. It's like there's something bigger than making money there. Money's there, but there's something bigger than money behind it. And that is, I like to call it an exfoliation of the soul.
That's cool.
And I'm the one holding the loofah. So
I don't think I ever heard that, but I like it.
And it really is, because I truly believe the more you are true to yourself, the more successful you will be. And so to not expect to understand the truth of yourself today or tomorrow or Friday or next Monday, but to understand that what a worthy quest for a lifetime. What a worthy quest. And so entrepreneurship is great, because if you want to discover who you really are, become an entrepreneur, but be ready, because in organizations, we can hide behind others, but in entrepreneurs, there's nothing between us and the world. And everything we're amazing at will be revealed. And everything that are opportunities for inner growth and development and humility will also be revealed. And if you really want to get to the essence of who you are, entrepreneurship will provide a lot of opportunities to look in the mirror.
Exactly, the mirror. Exactly. Yeah. And so I want to get back to, I love the question why. And I think a lot of times we don't, and that's kind of my interest in philosophy too, is we don't sit down and ask ourselves, why? Why am I doing this? Why do I want to become an entrepreneur? Why this field? Why that? And like, and being honest about it too. And once you kind of, and I like it, you eliminate stuff that is not you. And that's how you get to your true essence. And you say, well, this was my parents speaking, this was my school, this was my school teacher. And once you take that off the map, and then you get to the core self, and it's like, oh, this is what I really want. And then to be able to take that path. So it's, to me, it's a process of elimination. And that's how we can, it's discovery too. That's how we can find out what we want. But the subconscious is actually an ally, and it can help us, but we do have to listen to it too. So how can we remove those blocks? Because I don't think, I don't know, leadership classes, I don't think the subconscious gets enough credit for the amount of power it actually has over us and over our lives. And so yeah, let's talk about that. What is it? How would you define it? And how can we remove it so it doesn't block us?
Yeah, people have a really hard time about with this concept, because first of all, it does get a lot of credit. We've got Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize for his work, is all about the subconscious, right? But he's using the terminology system 1 and system 2 thinking. I think part of the problem is that there is a lot of language that people don't understand. Language like mindset is often misunderstood, because when you hear the word, it sounds very much like something you could change if you wanted to.
Like a thermostat, I'm gonna crank it up.
Yeah, like I get to make a choice and I'm going to have a different mindset, but that's not actually how it works.
No.
Mindset is the definition, and how it's used clinically, and all the benefits that come from it are really about what your subconscious goals are. And another term for that is a team of neuroscientists that I reveal their research in my book, It's Go Time, use the term hot goals. It's the same thing. They are subconscious, unconscious, not available to our conscious brain. We also hear the term beliefs. We also hear the term biases. Guys, we can roll this all up into the same concept. The milliseconds to up to 10 seconds prior to conscious awareness, most of what we see, say, and do are happening. So this is critical. And you brought up something I really appreciate you bringing up, that we can have a really good relationship with this part of ourselves. What certainly helped me as I was, I'm a pessimist. I'm someone who thought very poorly of myself for a very long time. And the older you get, if you have self-doubt or, you don't love yourself, actually, the more it becomes revealed in your life. So these things are not that noticeable in our 20s and 30s and in our 40s and 50s, because we get more of everything. And the reason why, and the work, Carol Dweck's original work on mindset sort of helps us understand, there's something called Hab's law, wire together, fire together, which means that every time we do something or think something, there's a neurological synapses in our brain that sort of wire us to behave that way. And we don't really realize that on the subconscious, this we only can handle around 7 ideas in our conscious. So believe me, most of the systems of your body are just figuring it out. You don't have to remember to breathe. You don't have to remember to do a lot of things. And that's because there's a part of your body who's going to take control of that. And I personally believe that if we work harmoniously with that part of our body, then we get further ahead. And here's the rub. I talk about this in my book. There's 2 languages. The language of the concept, of the conscious mind, are concepts and ideas, abstracts, success, love, abstract.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas happiness,
Yeah.
the language of our subconscious mind, this is the part of our brain that's moving my arms up and down right now, if you're watching the video, or it's the part of my brain that's interacting with the world and running my body. It's actually tactile. So it learns from the senses. It learns from sights and feelings and emotions, which is why people are trying to get you to do vision boards that are very emotionally moving, because this is you need to translate your goals into a language that it can understand. And if your goals are in conflict, you actually have to convince it. You have to go one step further. You have to be like a defense attorney, and you have to convince your subconscious to shift from an old goal. And for example, I deal a lot with, I don't want to be seen. Right. So a big one that I deal with is, I don't want to be in front or take space away from other people, or who am I,
My question would be why? Why don't you want to be seen? And it's like it's like really like getting to the root of the issue. It's like, why do you feel this way? And that's a fascinating discovery. But I think a lot of us just stop there. It's like, oh, that's the way I am. That's because that's the way it is. And I think really like diving into it and getting to some uncomfortable moments and feelings and beliefs and values and so on that are there, that are coming bubbling up. So I think like in terms of like subconscious is like psychologically like our body. When we're in pain, our body's alerting us, and when we feel anxious or when we lack confidence and when we're negative, there's something the subconscious is trying to communicate, but we keep ignoring it, and that is not helping. So when you're in pain, you would not keep going. Usually you would stop and say, well, let's deal with this. But we don't do the same with our mind and mental health and so on, I feel.
100%. And I was actually talking to a doctor on my podcast just weeks ago about this, because if we don't listen to the emotional needs of ourselves for long enough, then that will come out as a physical ailment, because it's socially acceptable to get sick and get attention, or it's socially acceptable to have certain things happen and get attention. And I agree with you that I think what makes, this is me guessing. So I think what makes it uncomfortable to talk about this part of the mind is, first of all, if in the field of science, neuroscience is still relatively new, and functional imaging like fMRIs and stuff like that, or MRIs, it's just new to be able to watch how our brain is working and firing. And I just think it's really hard, because you hear some people call it the unconscious and some people call it the subconscious. And at what point does this stop being science and start sounding like voodoo, And so I think, but we have seen phenomenal, highly credible scientists showing that there's regions of our brain that are acting that we're not aware of. And I we can call that safely the subconscious. I also want to touch on something you said, which was, those moments in discomfort of why. I've helped countless people discover their reason why. And it can be as simple for a woman, it can be as simple as, oh, don't show off. That's not ladylike. And having that message repeated over time and realizing, well, how can we assert ourselves and put our good into the world without going, where is the boundary of contributing our good and being too pushy? Where does that lie? Another thing I've seen come up a lot is, I've seen with men, my male clients, I've seen some sort of bullying that they don't even realize is still, they think it's not a part of them anymore. But when we go through the process to figure out what happened in the past, to stop, because there'll be like in number 2 jobs and like, just the number 2 problem instead of that. It's like, why not number 1? And that is often, not often, I would say I have several clients for whom, male clients, who are bullied and who got by getting out of sight. So when you want to be an entrepreneur, you can't be out of sight. It's really hard to be out of sight because you have to advocate for your business.
Yeah.
And so going in and reprogramming your subconscious to realize it's okay, it's safe to speak up now. A lot of people are afraid of opening Pandora's box, but the truth is the pain lasts moments. And the feeling of freedom that arises from healing these things, you get for the rest of your life. It is worth those few moments of discomfort.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And if you want to be inspiring, you need to be inspired yourself. If you want to motivate others, you need to be motivated yourself. So it's like, and I think to me that's leadership, of like really like you embody it, and then you need to be seen. I mean, of course, but you need to also kind of see yourself at the same time, in a way that's not distorted. And I think like a lot of things, like just about myself, is like I often like doubt things as well. Like you're saying, I went through that period, but at some point, you realize like, oh, I'm fine the way I am. And all these doubts are just like projected, but they're not reality. In many cases, we assume the worst, but in fact, people don't think badly of us. Maybe they actually don't have time to think about us in a negative way. They got other concerns and so on. So I think it's like really like coming to terms with that. And for me, confident, like positive thinking is something I'd actually want to talk about here. And I have like some clear ideas about it. But what you said about mindset, I find absolutely true. Like mindset is not just something that you just switch on. And I think I feel the same way about positive thinking, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
Well, I really want to acknowledge what you just said before I tell you my thoughts on positive thinking, which that is one of the topics that fires me up a bit. But before I get to that, I just really want to acknowledge what you said about honoring yourself and who you are and having come through that. And it made me think about the listener, because there's inherently, we just live in a world that at some point told us we were wrong, right? So just want to say to the listener, if you've ever been told you were wrong, right? You did something wrong, you weren't trustworthy, you didn't, follow through, you weren't honest with someone, you didn't meet a deadline, you promised it, like anything where you feel like you've disappointed yourself. I know who am I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I forgive you. You should forgive you. I hope you forgive you. We are all doing our best. And at any given moment, you did your best. And I want you to just let go of any idea that you need to be anyone other than who you are right now. And I want you to let go of the idea that you need to change or become another version of yourself to be lovable. I've met so many people, worked with so many people, and I feel like I know for sure that everybody has something special, a special gift. And I know you have a special gift. And almost certainly, this is what happens. Our special gifts are squashed as we're growing up for the very reason that they're special. Because growing up, we're trying to learn how to fit in, right? And so to fit in, we often dim our light of what makes us special. But we can't do this. What we need to do is actually, as an entrepreneur, particularly, but I would say anyone, if you're listening to this, doesn't matter, entrepreneurship, but as an entrepreneur, particularly, you can't dim your light and look like everyone else, or nobody will buy from you. You have to brighten your light. So the first thing to look at is, what is something you got in big trouble for doing growing up? What is something that you used to love to do and sort of people said that was wrong? Because that might be a clue to what's special about you. And in fact, what does and needs to come out in your adult life. So I just want to say that each and every listener here, I know for sure you've got something amazing about you.
I love that. And just want to add something to it too. I mean, our DNA is unique. We're unique in the world. So that's why what we bring to the world is unique. And we really need to mind that and discover that the same way, because we're born unique. And why do we want to conform? Because when you conform, you're giving up that uniqueness. You want to look like everybody else. You want to talk like everyone else and do the same things. And just celebrate that. That's something very special. And don't feel bad about it. And those people who make you feel bad about it is because they feel bad about it themselves. So it's that kind of cycle of, again, forgiveness, very important, yourself and others for doing what they're doing, saying what they're saying, because as Jesus said, they don't know what they're doing in many cases. And I do believe that. And not to take it very personally. I think that's hugely important too.
Well, I think this is very interesting. If we take this idea, first of all, not to take it personally, I love that. Second of all, to realize they don't know what they're doing. You don't know this is why, because our subconscious is actually running the show, not based on instructions you've given it, but based on a lifetime of messaging and instructions you may have given it when you were younger. And this is why this gentle way forward of coming together in relationship with this part of your brain is absolutely critical as you get older, to really this depth of self-knowledge, and to understand that everyone else is just operating on what they were told growing up. And so it can help bring forth a lot of compassion for others and for yourself, and to realize I don't think people are out there. This is not a malicious thing. This has happened naturally over time. We dimmed our light, we dimmed our magic, we dimmed our what's unique because we needed to fit in. So we weren't the one who was bullied. And so we hid the things that were weird and different about us growing up, because the nature of growing up makes us do that. And so if I look at this from sort of like a bigger, like, why would the world work in a way that systematically causes us to become like others? And perhaps it is so that we can systematically reflect. Let's just bring this full circle to how we began at the beginning.
It's okay if you're aware of it, though. I mean, that is my issue. If you do it on purpose, that is, I'm going to conform and I'm aware that I'm conforming, that is fine. That is fine by me, because it's like, then you are in control. But being driven and not knowing, that causes the issue where you think you are that. You can pretend to be someone, and if you're aware of it, that's fine. I had to talk about tricksters and how they fool others. And I think because they're not taking themselves so seriously, and they play games on it, they pretend to be somebody else, and they're aware of that. That
Yeah.
is the difference. But if you think who you are, and we see it with presidents who are misguided in their perception of who they think they are, and they're not that. But if they had a sense of humor and they were just projecting something and knew that was not them, they're just playing a game or a role, that's okay to a certain extent.
So let's go back to this idea of leaders. With during my master's in leadership, talking about this whole reflection period, we've definitely seen, and it is demonstrated, that leaders and people who take time every single day to reflect and even stop thinking or meditate, that this is a practice of winners. Why? Because when we get too much in our egoic mind, we lose sight of things. I'm bringing forth back intuition, and where does this come into it? And that actually comes into it from understanding that we are of more than one mind. And knowing how to access your mind of choice and control and action, the conscious mind, is a great thing. And that's the mind where you get to be definitive and decisive and make decisions and lay things down and pay attention to this talk right now that we're having, this conversation, this dialogue. But there's another mind that's sort of just running the show, and it needs a certain set of inputs to change. I think there's a third mind. And I talk about the two minds in my book, right? I talk about the conscious and the subconscious. But I also think we know that information like emotions are going from the gut, right, up to the brain, from the heart up to the brain. So there is also this need to just breathe and be in order to be smarter, which was challenging for me because I was, very heady person growing up. Everything was like here. And then when I realized I had to start honoring my physical vessel to be the person who really had me convinced, it was they're like, Jill, you should do it so you'll be healthier when you get older. I'm like, and they're like, Jill, you should do it. I'm like, who cares about that? I'm all about like the brain and the mind and whatever. And then someone said, your information's coming through your gut to your brain. So if that's not clean, you're not clean. I'm like, you mean I could get smarter? And
Well,
so
for me, it was a doctor I talked to, and he was on my podcast, and he said like there are three brains. And I thought, oh, really? Right. So there's the brain that we associate with the brain, your heart, and your gut. And so that makes us so much smarter. And why not access all those three brains? We talked
for
about
me, that's going to
only
be 4.
using 10% or 4. Okay, then
Yeah.
even better. The more the better here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the more the better, which makes me think, I bet you there's more, but I don't even want to go, but I'll just say, like, once we start realizing that there's all of these sources of information, and this comes back to intuition. And so we really need to get out of our head. We really need to settle that speaking. You did ask, I know before we wrap up, I did want to come back to your concept of positive thinking,
Yes.
because it annoys me sometimes. And what's funny, I'm going to hold up my mug in case, I do have this mug, and it's like optimist.
Yeah.
And this was a hard-won title that I wear now. And the
You
reason
earned it though.
I earned it.
Yes.
I earned it. I came from very academic, very critically minded family who criticize, who you'd say, like, there's a parade on Friday, and they'd be like, who is your source? How do you know? And it was
Double
just,
check.
I remember showing some of my favorite work. I'm so proud of it professionally. I really solved a problem for entrepreneurs, and it was like something no one else had solved. And I showed it to my brother, who, instead of just saying, wow, how cool, he graded it. I was like, who does that?
God.
Grades like show and tell. So it was
I'm
just,
an instructor, but I don't grade stuff. That's
well,
just
like,
when I have to.
and it was really neat. It was really neat. It was like this model to figure things out. It was just really interesting. I was like, well, you couldn't create it, but you could grade it. I don't even understand that. And so, but it's not it's not him doing it. It's our nature growing up. And so I was very self-critical, constantly seeing what I did wrong versus what I did right. But here's the problem that I have with positive talk, is that it can be a little Pollyanna. So if we're just going, Ross says, you can do it, you can do it. Old me, my podcast is called Thinking Vitamins, because I had to use vitamins on how to think, like literally control how I thought in order to change my negative self-talk. And that positive thing, what I remember for the longest time, just as soon as I would say, you can do it, there was like a, yeah, right, whispering somewhere. No, you can't. You're nobody. You're no good. You're dumb. You're not important. You're just, you're not from an influential family. You don't have the right, background. You don't have this, all the things wrong with me. I would just list. And that was shifted into positive thinking with a couple of key things. One, I think when we say stuff like, you can do it, and positive talk, I think we just want to back it up like, okay, how can you do it? When you ask a question, you force your subconscious to engage. It actually creates a link between your conscious and your subconscious, particularly if you ask what's called an open-ended question, which means you cannot answer it with the word yes or no. So that's going to start with a word like how, or what could, or how and what questions are typically really good for that. So how can I achieve this is something that can, how else could I achieve it? Or how could it get better? When you're like, oh no, things are good, they're going to fall apart. Instead say, how could it get better? So we can use language intentionally to improve our habitual thought. I think that's a really important concept for developing positive thinking. The other thing that sort of helped me earn my title of optimist is I learned at one point that optimists were more, they lived longer, they were happier, they were healthier. They had all these things that I knew I wasn't going to have. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm so negative about myself. How I want all that. So I start reading these books, by doctors and things like that on optimism, and discover, wait a second, optimism isn't Pollyanna. People who are optimists are not wearing rose-colored glasses and going, everything is great, like a lot of self-help movement would have you think. No, instead, I like to describe it this way. And my dog agrees. I like to describe it as there's a half, we often think of it as the glass half empty.
Yeah.
I like to think of an optimist this way. They look at an 8-ounce glass. They see 4 ounces of water in it. They say neither it's empty nor full. What they say is there's 4 ounces of water in an 8-ounce glass. How am I going to get 4 more ounces? That is, in fact, clinical optimism that leads to all of those wonderful life benefits, which for someone who used to be a pessimist like me is very attainable, because I don't have to be delusional or lie to myself. I can simply be realistic and say, yes, that is an 8-ounce glass. I have 4 ounces. I could look at my bank account and want a certain amount. How will I do it? It doesn't matter. The concept is it's practical. It's realistic and it's smart. And so that's.
Yeah, no, I really, I like optimism. I'm a huge fan of optimism, because I think that's the only way we can be. I think that's it, because it's like positive thinking is, I think we're fooling ourselves in many cases, where we just think, now I'm thinking positive, everything will be fine. But that takes out negativity, which is actually a great source of learning. And then where do you draw the line? And we see that with good and bad. And it's not that easy to decide something bad that happens to you is actually good for you. Suffering that you go through, I think midlife crisis is probably one of the best experiences, because of what you can take out of it, and not getting like bogged down or stuck in it. And so it's an opportunity. And I think the optimist, like once you clear like your browser, like just clear your cache, I think, and there's like nothing else, and you just like you're yourself, neither negative nor positive, you just this moment, then you can evaluate things and you can see the benefit. I would say glass is half full. Perfect. I'm gonna drink it. I got this glass and it's full. It's half full. That's wonderful, right? Instead of either thinking that it's half empty or saying, how much can I have more? I have this right now. I'm gonna try, of course, be driven and be motivated to have more, but I want to really appreciate the fact
I
that it's
love
half
that.
full. Yeah.
And that's really, because appreciating what we have, I think, is a great place to start. So it would be like, wow, look at me. I have like a half glass of water. I would have a
Exactly.
full glass. How could I get even more? So that is a
Yeah.
beautiful insight.
Yeah.
And I think it's very critical to have that frame of having, because we do always get more of what we're aware of. And I think so many people
And we
are.
focus on our lack. I don't have this. I don't have this. Okay, yeah, but what do you have? And then try to expand, right? In that sense.
Absolutely. It's a big focus and reframing that I do
Mhm.
with entrepreneur, purpose-driven entrepreneurs that
Mhm.
work with me or take our programs, because there's very intentional ways of learning. And I think that's something you brought up that also really piqued my curiosity. Another one of my pet peeves, and this really
Yeah.
bugs me, it annoys me, is it happened for the best.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Okay. This is something I agree with, which
Mhm.
makes it like, what do you mean it bugs you and you agree with it? It's like, yeah, I agree with it and it bugs me.
Mhm.
And I agree with it because it can be true. Because as you said, the midlife crisis can be the best thing that happens for you. And that can be true. And in my experience, is it's only if you learn the lesson. So
Mhm.
that there is, I believe that life is a learning experience.
Yeah.
And I believe that when we're done learning, we're done life. I think that that's really, those two things can't be separated. And what I believe is that people don't know how to learn those lessons. And so I see them kind of saying, kind of shrugging things off with
Mhm.
false positivity,
That's it. Yeah.
saying, yeah, well, it happened for a reason, and
Uh-huh.
kind of like not taking a lot of ownership or domain over that.
Or it was destined to happen. And that's another way of like, just like, yeah, not taking ownership, not accepting
Passivity.
responsibility. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm writing, my whole next book is on this topic.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I'm putting together a research group on this. I'm
Mhm.
doing this and collecting some data because I know that people really don't know how to learn their life lessons, and I don't feel there is I feel like that's needed
Mhm.
in the conversation right now, because what I've witnessed is, if you can truly rise to the occasion and learn the lesson of a life experience. And to me, that often goes back to forgiveness. It often goes back to healing something. For those of you listening who are comfortable with the idea of healing something from your past in this life, great. Some people are comfortable with the idea that they might have brought karma from, we have the idea of like the sins
Mhm.
will visit the
Mhm.
children or 7 generations. And so it might be something that ancestors have done,
Mhm.
or if you believe in your own past lives, whatever that is, there is an element of forgiveness. We know that we can't get annoyed or irked at situations or frustrated with things that aren't incomplete, that are complete within us when they're incomplete.
Mhm.
So the very act of something bad happening, I used to cry and go, why me? Why me?
Mhm. Oh yeah,
I,
yeah, yeah. Why me? Yeah.
I work so hard. I try so
I'm such a
hard.
good person.
I'm such a good person and I do all these good things for other people. Why
Yeah.
me? So much pain I've had. And then when I realized, thank you.
Hmm.
And now my period of mourning after something bad happens is so, and I'm not talking about a close loved one passing. I'm not talking about
Hmm.
something I'm talking about,
Hmm.
my business, something
Hmm.
happens,
Hmm.
you
Sure.
know, something that truly is not, I'm not
Hmm.
talking about like other types of things. I'm talking about those upsets, those arguments,
Hmm.
those business disappointments, those projects, those kinds of things, and saying, what did I need to learn? So I will literally write it on my list. When something bad has happened to me, I will write on my list, what do I need to learn? How do I need to grow?
Hmm.
What do I need to forgive in myself and others? And I can shift right away to a learning, growing, healing. And I know for certain. Okay, so I'm going to say something.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
something I normally only say to people who are in my membership or mastermind, but I'm going to say it.
Okay.
When you put a goal on your agenda, that goal is beyond what you're doing now. You asked me earlier, this might be a nice way to wrap up looking at time. You asked me earlier, how big a goal? Well, let me put it this way. How big a lesson do you want? So you put this goal up there and it's substantively different than anything you have achieved or created to date. And it causes you to, really level up to that next thing. I will literally put, the goals on the mirror, whatever. I'll put my goals on the mirror. And then just for a split second, I'll like kind of go, oh God, I hope the lesson that I need to grow through, not go through, grow through is going to be gentle. And so I'll put something on my goal and then I'll say, please allow me to learn what I need to learn and do what I need to do in the most gentle and graceful way possible. I will be open to my messages. Please don't, I've had a car accident. I've been sort of knocked down big time. So I've been a bit of a punching bag because I've been dense, so I try to be open so that I can.
That's a great point. I think openness, curiosity, and a reaction of like something happens, whether good or bad, just saying interesting. That's interesting. Instead of why me, kind of replacing that. And again, the reframing, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Now, what do I do about it? Or how can I handle this? And I think that is really important because it is interesting. Life is interesting. And there are these surprises that come out of nowhere, good or bad, that are showing us something. And I think that's hugely important. One thing I do want to mention too is you have a Boom You, which was created in 2018.
Yes.
I always applaud people. That's an online coaching and training business. And I always applaud people who do that before the pandemic because they're the true visionaries. After the pandemic, it's like, yeah, of course, like everybody does that. But doing that before is quite amazing. Let's talk a little bit about that too.
Thank you. Yes, it was before the pandemic. It was something that I was discovering a need for in my own life, getting out of organizations, getting out of the grind, getting out of, rush hour traffic. And I really wanted to get people working online. I used Zoom before anyone even knew what it was, which
good for you.
I pinned. Well, yes and no.
I actually opposed it.
I should have bought stock.
Exactly. Yeah, but okay, nobody's perfect. But I love that because I was actually writing against it. I was like, this won't work. Education remotely doesn't work. It's not the same. And I was wrong, and it's like now I'm embracing it. So I'm not really a visionary in that sense. But you are.
My clients were rallying against it somewhat.
Yeah.
But I have been building businesses for 2 decades now. So yeah, you're right. It's not just some sort of business of convenience. Real knowledge in how to build businesses across industries and critically not Me Too businesses, because you mentioned a lot of people are doing this now, but what a lot of people are doing is selling sort of a business in a kit. It's like, follow my, steps and you'll have a business. And they're not teaching the foundational elements that help an entrepreneur truly thrive, which you can think of it like an MBA for entrepreneurship. The other thing is marketing has changed dramatically since the last couple of years, since we've all stayed at home. And in the first year, marketing and marketing messaging needs have changed. And because I've been doing this for 2 decades, the kind of ways that worked for marketing a few decades ago, these rules aren't always working. And so I know that I went down the wrong road a few times because of this very problem. And what's happened is the first year where we were all in lockdown, certain things worked really well in marketing. And the people who figured that out did very well. The second year, that actually changed. And so what worked the first year didn't work in the second year. And so when we're learning these kits and systems, we have to also know enough to know whether or not they're still current.
Mhm.
And one of the things about having foundational training as an entrepreneur, the things that never change in your business is things like, how you perform or how you lead or how you make decisions or how you develop strategy or how you get enough information or how do you get the right voices in the room or how do you know or move forward with confidence or how do you choose the right program. All of these types of things are foundational and can support you. And when you have that, you ask the right questions so that you don't get taken down the garden path somewhere. So I do it differently because I really do believe in foundationally developing people to be leaders,
Mhm.
because that's something that does require development, and we can't follow our coaches into success. We have
Mhm.
to lead ourselves into success. And so that's a foundational difference.
And there are some who are stuck in their old ways and they're not learning, they're not adjusting to the new reality. And that's not good either, where you just like, you do have to go with the flow, but again, bring your unique touch again to that, your unique vision. And now it's just like you're moving it from one medium to another, but it's that vision is still the same.
Absolutely. Although I must confess, I think
Mhm.
that those who are listening here to you, Arash, are
Mhm.
forward-thinking people who are not doing that. I think that you have an audience of people who are interested in learning about themselves and
Mhm.
the world and our relationship to the world, and who are thinking in a bigger way about who they are. I don't think they're the ones who are stuck
Yeah.
in,
No,
I think
no,
I
they're not.
genuinely, right now, you and I are speaking to some pretty evolved people because I've paid attention to your podcast, and I'm
Mhm.
aware that you're elevated in the types of things you think about and share.
Mhm. Thank you so much for being here. It was such a wonderful discussion, such a fascinating discussion, Jill McAbe. You're an author, teacher, coach, entrepreneur, and your book, It's Go Time, Build the Business and Life You Really Want. We got a bit of a glimpse of it. There's so much more to discover there. I highly recommend people to check out your book, as well as you have a podcast, Thinking Vitamins. Highly recommend it too, because you're driving things, you are getting the creative juices flowing, and you are diving into the subconscious. I applaud all of that, and technology too. So thank you so much for being on Rash's World.
It's been simply my pleasure. And thank you very much for inviting me for this conversation. I've had a lot of fun sharing these ideas with your listeners. I hope to hear from some of your listeners if they have
Absolutely.
any questions or want to take a conversation further.
Mhm. Thank you so much.